Dawn Rohrs was an engineer working in the oil fields of Oklahoma. But after her third stint in the chaotic industry, she decided it was time for a change.
I literally showed up to the test to get my license, and the guy asked me if I was in the wrong room, and I was like, no, I think I'm in the right room. And he said, well, have you read the book? And I went, there's a book? And I sat down, and in the 20 minutes before the test, skimmed the book and passed the test with like a 98%.
A month later, she was installing septic systems with husband and boys while leading the change to bring Oklahoma's installer credentials in line with other states. Listen in. Hi, Dawn. Thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Hey, how are you?
We're fantastic. So you've got an interesting story. You started in the oil fields in Texas right out of college. Is this going to be accurate or not accurate?
Well, it is accurate, except I got to college kind of weird. So I actually got married while I was in high school and went to college later in life, and then came out of college and went into the oil and gas.
So oil and gas, you have a degree in chemical engineering from the University of North Dakota. Is that correct?
Yep.
So is that what led you then to the gas and oil industry, or like what was the...
So my hometown is Ponca City, Oklahoma, which is where Conoco started. And so it was kind of a rite of passage that if you lived in Ponca, you worked for Conoco.
So if that's the case, are you one of those people now that watches Landman and critiques all the things that are wrong?
I can't even watch it. It just annoys the heck out of me.
You're going to tell me it's so bad that all of us who don't understand the oil industry at all, that's why we find it fascinating, but you guys look at it and think it's just garbage?
Yeah, my husband loves watching it, and I get so mad when I watch it, especially the portrayal of the drilling engineer, because that's what I did for 20 years. And right. I'm like, that guy's a moron.
The drilling engineer is kind of like the chubby little guy, right? Who eats all the time. Is that he's the drilling engineer?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, we digress here, right? So you're working in the oil industry, and in like 2015, the oil industry starts to, the industry itself didn't collapse, but basically government regulation kind of shut a lot of it down. Is that kind of what happened there?
Yeah. So oil and gas, it was having a rough patch. Oil dropped to like $23 a barrel. And there was a huge layoff. I made it through the first 3 rounds of layoffs, and eventually, though, I was on the chopping block. And so I was stuck with nothing to do. Now I got a great severance pay. That's the good thing about working for an operator in oil and gas is you get good severance. But I was sitting at home driving my husband absolutely bonkers.
So is the severance what set you up to transition into?
It is. And so my husband said, hey, we have a buddy that is doing this, and he thinks it's something we can do on the side. And so we bought our first excavator and dove into it with no idea what we were doing.
So you and your husband started right off the bat doing septic installation, and you have this background in chemical engineering. What does Oklahoma require for licensing?
Not nearly enough. So I literally showed up to the test to get my license, and the guy asked me if I was in the wrong room, and I was like, no, I think I'm in the right room. And he said, well, have you read the book? And I went, there's a book? And I sat down, and in the 20 minutes before the test, skimmed the book and passed the test with like a 98%.
Wow. I don't even know if we should have said that. Is it any more stringent now, or is it still that lax?
It's still that lax. And we're working on getting regulations changed. But you still have to do like 7 installs that have to be inspected by the DEQ and all that. And they have to meet the regulations in the book. I'm just good at tests. I'm good at scanning material and going, got it.
Well, that would concern me if I was in your line of work in Oklahoma, because the barrier to entry would be so easy that it seems to me like anybody who sees somebody successful and can dig, I'm gonna real loose terms, dig a hole and install septic. I get it's not that easy. I've been doing this 30 years too. But my point is anybody who thinks they can pass the test would think they could be a competitor. Is that?
Oh, it's terrible. So bootlegging is a huge problem in Oklahoma because our regulations are so lax that you don't even have to have a license. You can install 10 systems a year without a license. And the issue is I can install 10, my husband can install 10, both my boys can install 10. So you can literally have a business built on the fact of not having a license. And if you're not licensed, you're not bonded, you're not insured. And there's people out there hanging up their shingle saying, I'm a septic company, that have no insurance, no license, no training. and it's perfectly legal. I'm on the board of the Oklahoma On-Site Wastewater Association, and we've been trying to get that changed. We actually got a bill through the state Senate and state House last year, and our governor vetoed it.
This is very surprising to me because in Wisconsin, it's very, very opposite of this. There is quite a bit of testing. There is no such thing as installing not even one system if you're not licensed. Typically, your master plumbers and people of that nature are the only people holding a septic license. There's a significant barrier to entry. Again, speaking of Wisconsin, so I think it would be wise for those of you who are already in the industry and trying to push it in a more professional direction, like you guys sound like you are, to definitely push that legislature in Oklahoma to your advantage. Because to say that if you have a couple of kids, a husband and a wife combo can put in 40 septics a year, depending on what you get for a septic down in Oklahoma, let's call it $5, $10, $15, $20,000. There's your living with no overhead.
Right. And we've had a huge problem with bootlegging. I mean, even with the barrier of entry being so low, there's still people out there not even following the most basic requirements of getting a permit, of doing things the right way. And so it's a huge problem here.
Are you attending North America's premier wastewater event? The WET Show, taking place February 18 to the 20th in Indianapolis, Indiana, features an expansive expo hall, showcases new products and services, provides networking opportunities with peers, and sessions for continuing education hours with industry-leading experts. Register now to attend WET Show at wetshow.com. That's WWETTSHOW.com.
So it's 2016 and you take the severance pay from Conoco and you decide you're going to start doing septic installation the right way. You go out and get a license. That first year, are you making a living putting in septics? How many systems are we talking about here? What type of system is prevalent in Oklahoma? Is it just a standard septic drain field or is it an aerobic system? What do you guys...
So most prevalent here is an aerobic system because we are in central Oklahoma, right in the OKC metro. And so lots of subdivisions that are on aerobic and are on septic. And so aerobic is the natural choice with the smaller lots. And I think we did 20 systems the first year, I believe. My very first system ever was an ETA, which is considered like one of the hardest ones to install in Oklahoma. And when the inspector came out to look at it, she was like, "What are you doing? Why is this your first system? And why is a chemical engineer working as a groundman on a septic system?" And I'm like, "Look, oil's $20 a barrel. You got to do what you got to do."
So how did you just, I mean, to the point you went in, you said you passed the test and now you're installing systems.
Yep.
So how did you learn the right way to do it right off the bat? I mean, I can't imagine you were just trial and error.
I read the book cover to cover. And even today, like if there's a problem that comes up, a lot of installers will call me and be like, "Hey, what does the book say about this?" Because I know that book from cover to cover.
Okay. So you're installing 20 systems year one. It's probably not a business yet. At what point do you start to gain momentum and what causes that? Just word of mouth or...
So we are 3 years in. I'm still working oil and gas. My husband is working the business full time. We're doing at that point like 50 or 60 a year, I think.
What year is this? Like you said 3 years in, it's like 2018, 2019?
Yeah, 2018, 2019. And so we get a call from our septic tank supplier and he says, "Hey, I'm done doing septic tanks. If you want to continue, you can buy the molds from me. You can buy the trucks from me. But by the way, it's Friday and you have Monday to decide."
Are these precast or poly and how big is this business?
Yeah, it's precast and it's a pretty large business. And so we ended up buying, I think we bought 4 tank molds from him and we bought 2 trucks from him. And overnight we were precasting and we also were able to get a lot of the builder contracts that he had. We didn't buy the business, but we had a good relationship with him. And so we went literally overnight from doing like 40 to 60 a year to doing, I think we did 200 that first year.
So what helped you guys out was this opportunity to buy the precast molds for the tanks. And when you say 2 trucks, you're talking about tank delivery trucks.
Yeah, rail trucks. So we now have 2 rail trucks and a knuckle boom.
Okay. So you buy this equipment. You have a weekend to think about it. Where do you get the funds for this?
I still had money from my severance, and I was back to
Okay.
working oil and gas at that point. So, it was, we went to the bank to get some of it, and we just made it happen.
The severance in this situation actually happened to be just much to your advantage, because you had no capital obstacles early in starting the business, which is where most people run into trouble: cash flow and initial startup capital. So, if you say that there was a good to that whole Conoco deal, that's definitely it.
So I've actually been oil and gas, you get laid off quite a bit. I've been laid off 3 times, and each time I've gotten a severance, and the severance has been better and better. So when people would joke, oh, you got laid off, and I'm like, no, I'm fine. Like, my husband got to the point, he was like, are you going to make a career of getting laid off? And I'm like, maybe.
Right. So now you pick up the precast molds. Your business basically triples, quadruples overnight or over the course of a year.
Yeah.
And this is like 2020.
Yeah, and there was a lot of growing pains.
So I would assume part of the growing pains have to be staff, because originally this is just you and your husband putting systems in the ground, and you're doing 40, which you can handle. That's 1 a week, let's call it. Now you go to 200. Now you're looking at, 3 or 4 a week. What does that look like? How are you expanding that way?
So we brought on some of the staff that had gotten laid off from the other company going out of business. We also brought in both of our boys to work for the company full time. They're both in their 20s. So and they had been doing it with us, so that worked for us. And then I worked in oil and gas for another 4 years, and then I came into the company full time. So it's pretty much still a family company. We have 5 family members that work for us now.
So, okay, let's go down that road. When you've got 5 family members working together, I'm going to venture to say I work with a little bit of family, and that, in my opinion, causes more friction than anything, because you have a tendency to talk to your family different than you talk to another coworker. Is that an issue, or is this harmonious?
Oh no, it's absolutely an issue. All 4 of us are hot-headed and a little bit rough around the edges. Especially my husband was in oil field as well, and so there's times when I tell my kids to do something, and they're like, "No, I'm not doing it." And I just want to strangle them. And there's times that my husband has told my kids, like, if you weren't family, I'd have fired you.
Well, and there's a really difficult separation. I find when you work with family, it's really difficult to separate work and family. You work together all day, which would make it seem like you're not going to go home and talk about work. But a lot of times you go home and still talk about work.
Yeah, really, we do. I mean, my husband and I, we talk about work quite a bit. The boys have their own houses, so at least they get to get away from it a little bit. I'm a workaholic. I always have been. I have been since I was in the oil field. And so for me to put in a 14 or more hour day is no big deal. But my husband's like, no, I want to leave work at work. And I'm still like, no, we got to talk about work.
Yeah, that's hard. But, the nice thing about family is what you're getting. Even if there's frustration there, you knew what you were getting. The personality, the work ethic. I know if it does come to a point, like, you said your husband commented that if you weren't my boys, I would have fired you already. Maybe so. But it's hard to find good employees. And I would think that maybe helped you out.
It has. And, my kids are completely opposite personalities. So my oldest he's amazing at troubleshooting a septic system. Like, my husband sends him out a lot when there's a problem. And he's very serious and just takes everything like really, really serious. My youngest is not that way at all. And he would talk to a brick wall if he didn't have anybody else to talk to. And so they fight a lot. We've actually
That's why he's the youngest.
Yeah. And we've actually had a builder call, and they're like, hey, are your 2 boys, like, the 2 guys that came out, are they related? And I'm like, oh yeah, why? And he was like, well, I just drove by and they're screaming at each other in the front yard. And luckily it was a new construction site. There was nobody else around, and he found it really funny. And I'm like, yeah, that's working with family.
Yeah, it is, and it's funny. It's a good thing it was a new construction site, because I know that's the other thing is you sometimes are oblivious to your surroundings, because again, you talk to family different than you talk to other employees, but you've gotten past that. So there's 5 of you currently, or there was 5 of you then right away in like 2020, 2021?
There's 5 of us currently. I think in 2021, there was probably 4 of us at that time. And we
Okay.
had as many as 6 family members working here.
So you're installing septics in 2021. At some point, you actually get into service work too, like the actual pumping.
Yep, we did. So we were in pumping early on. I think we had our first pump truck in 2017. We had it for a year. We got rid of it. We just couldn't keep up with everything. And then we just recently got a new pump. Well, I say new. It's one that a friend of us blew the motor on, and he was like, I'm done with this truck. And so we basically bought the tank that was on it. He threw in the truck for free. And so we're rebuilding that. And it was kind of, I mean, the truck's a great truck. We put a new motor in it and everything. It looks rough. And it was kind of kismet that about the same time this happened, Fruitland Manufacturing reached out and they were like, hey, we'd love to do a collab with you. And I'm like, I've got the perfect truck to put a pump on.
Huh. Well, that worked out well. Did you recognize the need for pumping just because you're like, why are we putting all these systems in the ground and letting someone else maintain, or what brought that on?
Yeah, that was exactly what it was. That, we were doing the inspections because that's required on your aerobics because of the NSF requirements. And we were doing the installs, and I'm like, man, there's just a lot of money that we're letting somebody else have when we could do it just as easily.
So you felt like you were leaving money on the table.
Yep.
So what type of licensing do you need in Oklahoma to run a septic truck? Because in Wisconsin, that would be totally different.
It is. So I actually have 3 licenses. I'm an installer, I'm a soil profiler or designer is what they're called in most states, and then a pumper. And it's really simple. You go to a class, you take a test, you get a bond, and you have to prove that you have a place to dump. And that's about the extent of getting a license.
So land application in Oklahoma is the primary disposal method?
I would say most people are probably taking it to a municipal facility. We actually land up, but it's hard because there's more and more municipal facilities that aren't allowing septage to be disposed. And so it's every year when you go to renew your license, it's getting harder and harder to get a affidavit from somebody to allow you to dump on their location.
So is that right now kind of your number one business? What business obstacles do you guys see down there primarily? Is that it?
Well, I think that's a big one, but I think the biggest obstacle right now is we have to make our licenses worth something. We can't just have people that decide they're going to go rent an excavator from Home Depot and buy a plastic septic tank and call themselves a septic company, because the quality and the protections that we have with licenses aren't there.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's how we started this conversation, because I was honestly shocked to hear that. I had no idea that it was that loose down there.
Yep.
I'm familiar with most of the Midwest states, and they kind of all follow one another. Again, pretty stringent. So that shocked me, and that would make me pause and hesitate to even get into that business. Meaning to try and do it the way you're doing it, just when you know that your competition doesn't have to play by the same rules. To your point, your expenses would even be far more significant if you're bonded and insured. I would imagine
Absolutely.
That's relatively expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's really driven the prices down. So in Oklahoma, we're one of the lowest costs for putting in a septic system. And that's because there's so many unlicensed and unbonded people that are doing it, and bootleg people that are doing it. You drive across the border in Texas and you go to Kansas or anywhere else, and they're getting substantially more money to put septic systems in. And it's really a strain for the companies that are trying to do the right thing.
Well, that's not a good business deal either. I mean, it's just essentially a race to the bottom.
It is. And we have companies out here that they look at it, I'll be the cheapest and I'll get all the business. And you finally have to get the mentality that, look, I'm going to do what I have to do for my business. And I'm going to do it the right way. And then you have to communicate that with your customers that, yeah, you can find someone cheaper. I'm not trying to be the cheapest person out here, but I'm going to do your system the right way. And I'm going to service it the right way. And we'll be here tomorrow when you need us.
So have you given up on trying to compete on price?
Absolutely.
Good for you. And I would think that to some people, there has to be value in realizing this guy can do it for X and you can do it for Y. And let's say that Y is even double or 50% more. I think that's probably how you came up with this whole, the septic girl or that septic girl persona is education is your key to probably being able to drive that higher price.
It's part of it. I mean, I decided that we're going to educate homeowners on the right things that should be done with their septic system. And we've always based our business on let's do the right thing. And part of that is, educating homeowners. Like I'm big on not using septic tank additives. And I know it's a revenue stream, but I'm like the research, the engineer in me has done the research. And I'm like, there just isn't research that supports using it. And so that was kind of where this started is we're going to do the right thing and we're going to educate homeowners on what the right thing is. And it just kind of grew from there. And my husband, the first videos that I had go viral were toilet paper. Like I literally put toilet paper in a jar of water and said, look, don't use this toilet paper. It doesn't break down. And my husband goes, who's going to watch that? And I'm like, I don't know.
1.2 million people did.
Yeah. 1.2 million. And that's just on TikTok. I think every platform has like 1 million views on it or over 1 million.
So is education your marketing strategy or do you partake in other forms of marketing?
Education's a big one. I mean, we're actively involved in a lot of stuff. I think trying to stress, look, we're a family company. We're part of the community and we're also going to be here when you need help, whether that's you calling me and going, hey, I'm building a barn. I just have some questions on how we're going to tie this barn in. And I think that's kind of what I'm known for, at least, is as educating, whether it be a builder or a homeowner or even realtors. We do classes for realtors.
So how are you getting that message out there? Via social media, billboards, radio ads?
Primarily social media and word of mouth.
Is social media an obstacle for you as far as typically, like, let's just talk Facebook, it's kind of pay to play, or are you getting okay organic reach?
So it's difficult. The business Facebook page, it does okay. It's mostly organic reach. That Septic Girl funnels a lot into it. So like right now I have a video going viral. I think this morning it had almost 1 million views. And so it gets our name out there. So when people start saying, oh, who's that Septic Girl? And they realize that we're local. I've had lots of people call and be like, hey, I saw you online. Can you come pump my septic tank or can you come help me?
That was going to be my next question was when you're going viral with a video like you are, let's talk about the toilet paper video. Let's just talk about the 1.2 million views on TikTok. Clearly, probably 1.19 million of those aren't in Oklahoma.
Correct.
But there's still enough value there that you just keep doing it this way?
We do. And, there's some other things that we're looking at doing. In fact, this week I've been taking a marketing class. But it's still, I tell people that when you have 1.2 million people looking at it, it's still getting more local views than if you had 10 people looking at it.
Good way to look at it. So what avenues of social media are you're using? TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram?
Yep.
Okay. So do you post every single item of content to all 4 of those platforms?
I wouldn't say every single item, but most of it.
Okay. And are you the one doing all of this?
I am. It's exhausting. I don't post nearly as much as like you look at Dom doing Poor Pumper Society, like he posts every day. And it's just exhausting for me to try to do that, especially when I'm doing everything else. So I'm a board member on the Oklahoma On-Site Wastewater Association. I'm vice president of the National Association of Wastewater Technicians. I do tons of other things. And so I just don't have time to do it. I post as much as I can.
I was going to say, not even like, I understand that isn't it almost more of like a burden to have to stop what you're doing when you're trying to, to do a job and record it?
Yeah, it is. The guys, I'll be like, did you get video today on the job? Because I can't get out to every job. And they're like, no, we don't have time to do that. And so that's part of it, is just getting the footage or making time to sit down and make one in studio. It just takes time. And it's not just the time of the video. I mean, by the time you edit and you post it on all 4 platforms, like you're looking at another hour just beyond filming it.
Is this something where maybe you could go to a local university and get an intern and you could grab all your content for an entire summer for a few $1,000 bucks?
Possibly. And we've talked about doing that. despite what people think, like I'm not getting rich from doing social media. I make a little bit, but I'm not getting rich from it. And it
You're
probably
not quitting your day job, and there's
no,
no
not
severance
anytime
at social
soon
media.
anyway. But we've talked about it, but it just doesn't make sense right now to, to do that. Although I've absolutely would love to do that.
One tip that I did notice this is you have the ability to pin your TikTok videos, and you should pin those top videos of yours. You just grab them and pin them, because then you get it will funnel more followers to you. I've noticed that. So, and I get that you have 9 million things going on, and that's real low on your list, but I had to scroll to find that toilet paper video. And then I was like, well, look at this, 1 million. And it's probably like your 100th video down. So a pin would do you some good on that. So now it's 2025. You're installing a couple hundred systems a year. Is that accurate?
Yeah, between 150 and 180. We actually scaled back and fired some of the customers that we didn't like working with about 2 years ago.
Fired some of the customers you didn't meaning builders, or you're saying some of your maintenance contracts, or both?
Some of the builders. We had a builder that was doing 300 houses a year, but they were so needy. I mean, I had staff that was dedicated just to them, and I finally convinced my husband that with the amount of attention they needed, you really weren't making any money on them, and so I fired them.
So your business, or your background is in chemical engineering, but you're saying some very interesting things from a business perspective. Are these things you just learned on the fly, or you're reading books on this too? Because you're making good decisions, and typically engineering brains, I'm going to stereotype here, have trouble with some of these things.
So I actually started my MBA. I haven't finished it. And then not only that, I was an engineer, but I wasn't your typical engineer. So as a drilling manager, like I looked at contracts, and I managed about 400 people at one point. I managed $100 million a year budget. So I did a lot of business type stuff. Now there have been some books that I've read. One of my favorite is The Pumpkin Plan. I absolutely love that book. And Don't Split the Difference is another great one. But yeah, I look at things a little differently.
Well, that Conoco experience, you just summarized your job description. When you're managing $100 million and 400 people, those are some valuable skills, especially to just translate it into I'm going to say a little family business, but that's all incredibly valuable. And that's something you don't learn in a book a lot of times.
You don't. Like, one of the things that's really hard for me to translate to my husband is, like, you have to have procedures, because in the oil field, we had procedures for everything. If a new guy came out, you handed him a book and you said, here's your procedure. And if you can't do the job based on the written procedure, then we need to rewrite the procedure. And so getting that translated to my husband, that's how you grow the business, is if you have a new installer come in, we should have a procedure that you hand to him and say, this is how we expect a septic system to be installed.
Husbands always drag you down.
They do, I'm telling you.
So what's the long-term goal here? Like, what do you think, are you guys just trying to grow steady, stay where you are? What is this?
So because septic licenses don't have value in the state of Oklahoma right now, we're actually trying to expand. We're wanting to do a plumbing division. And so we're looking at expanding that, because I think we can add value to homeowners when we go in and say, look, we can help you with everything on the water related side, and really add value to the customers that way. Because until the state fixes the licensing problem, a septic license has zero value.
So I assume a master plumber license is a different animal altogether?
It is. And so we are trying to find somebody right now to hire that is looking to retire, or looking to downsize their current plumbing business, and we'll bring them in as a vice president of the company and put them over our plumbing division and grow from there.
Did you tell me you were outside of Oklahoma City?
We are just north of Oklahoma City.
So I would think that acquisition has to be something you could consider there too.
Yeah, we're looking. So we really just started putting the feeler out really hard just in the last, I would say, few weeks, reaching out to some of the local supply houses, that kind of thing, and just seeing, do you know anybody that's looking to exit their business?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be your easiest strategy there. You could have someone, like you say, stay on for a year or so, especially a lot of times in both the septic industry, talking about the pumping side of it, and sometimes in the plumbing, not so much in the big cities like your area, but in the rural areas like where we are, a plumber might just be a one-man show.
Right.
So there really is no succession plan there. So if you could find the right person, and pick up those contacts and that knowledge and somebody to train you that way, the barrier, the monetary barrier there is relatively low because you're not necessarily buying a business. You're just buying someone's profession, if that makes sense.
Yep. And that's what we're hoping to do is find somebody. Now we would have to have them come in for a 5-year contract because we would need 5 years to get our contractor license. And so, that's somebody that will pay you. We just need your contractor license. And then we need you to help us manage until we can get our feet under us.
Well, and if you guys already have a nice organizational structure, which it sounds like you do based on a lot of the intelligent things you've said so far today, you might be able to help a small plumbing business out because a lot of times what they don't like to do is scheduling and billing and customer service. And maybe that's something where you could scale where both businesses benefit.
That's what we would hope is, we'll make it worth your while to come help us grow. And then you can exit your business and hopefully have some extra money in your pocket.
So if you branch into plumbing and you're doing these septic installs, you're doing the service work, 20 years from now, is the plan for the boys to take this over or to sell it, or you haven't thought that far ahead yet?
So originally our plan was for the boys to take it over, but neither one of them really want to. So they both have gone to school for engineering as well. And they don't really see themselves as being septic people for the rest of their lives. Although, I think they're happy right now where they are. But like our oldest loves doing maintenance work, loves doing that type of stuff, but he doesn't want to do installs. And so if the business does carry over to him, it'll look different.
And I mean, we're getting, they're in their 20s. What I thought about in my 20s is a lot different than what I think about in my 50s now. I would have loved to have the opportunity to take over a family business. I didn't have that opportunity, but when I was 20, I guarantee you I'd have been like, yeah, no. So who knows? Maybe that could change.
Yeah. And my youngest is very, very opinionated. And in fact, at one point when we were like, look, if you weren't our kid, we'd fire you. He was like, fine, I'll quit. And he quit for like 6 months and actually went to work for Chick-fil-A. And he came back. He was like, yeah, I'm ready to come back to work.
You're describing every stereotypical younger child, just so you know. I have a younger brother and we have a youngest child, and they're all from the same mold. Well, I guess I don't really have anything else. I think that what you're doing is very interesting. A lot of strategy right now revolves around social media for a lot of players and education. I think that your Conoco background, if I'm to gather anything from this, is probably what set you up for this entire business to be successful. Not that your hard work and the right people, but it's nice to have that as your, like we said, that to be able to lay the groundwork to get this going. So
yeah, I've definitely had lots of people be like, you're not the typical septic guy. And I'm like, well, I mean, I don't want to be the typical septic guy.
Well, I'll remind people that they can find you on social media under That Septic Girl, because you are not that septic guy.
That's right.
I appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you.
You can learn more about Dawn at cycloneseptics.com or follow her on her social journey at That Septic Girl on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Be sure to like and share these podcasts so we can keep more of this great content coming.